what if God put that there just for you to get through it? What if God puts that injury on you just so that you have to go back and retrain the things that you were weak at and you avoided and were scared of? And I feel like that's such a thing in our Christian walk of like, man, if I'd have just done this in the first place, I would have never ended up where I was, and I would not have to be going through what I did.
Welcome to the Y2 Fitness Podcast. This is your host, Aaron O'Connell, and I am here with Wilson Bailey. Say hello, Wilson.
Hey, what's going on, Aaron?
Oh, not much. I'm excited to be here. How are you doing today?
Dude, I'm feeling fit, feeling good. Had a good training day this morning, and just happy to be on the show, man.
Well, that is what we are here today for, is we are talking about CrossFit and Christianity. So let's just open it up to you right now. Let our listeners learn a little bit more about you. So talk about yourself. What do you do? What have you been doing? How'd you get into CrossFit? Let's just hear your story a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of found CrossFit later in my life going into the military. So my foundations of fitness lie with me going after first my military career. I was in the gym kind of training for like high school sports, watching those idiot CrossFitters outside doing those weird pull-ups and making fun of them while I was curling in a squat rack, you know. And I get training for the military, and they had us doing CrossFit workouts, and it was never called CrossFit. Get into the military, and they have us doing CrossFit workouts, and it still wasn't CrossFit, but it's what it was, and that's where that brand really started out, was these high-level elite military units doing this fitness program, and it trickled down to gyms and programming from there, and they had us doing it. And I get out of the program that I was in, and we are like at my first base, and these guys are like, dude, come to the gym with us. Absolutely, man. Have you ever done CrossFit? And it's like, no. You're like, oh, okay, well, try it, man. And it's like, oh, I've been doing this for 6 months now. Nobody ever told us. And from there, it kind of evolved into me just pursuing this job as a coach, as a volunteer coach at my base, and then pursuing it more and more, and finding this like love for fitness and the passion for like helping others pursue their fitness in the military. And I had such a love for it that it kind of developed into like, hey, I want this to be my full-time job and my like singular passion for helping others develop and grow. And then I got out of the military and moved to Florida, and now I got this crazy opportunity to work as the head coach at a gym here called CrossFit West Boca. And in the process of it all, like, God has like found me, placed me into fitness so I can reach more people in this community, and just made this story that I could not have imagined my place being in it. But I'm here. And it's just been a really, truly me stumbling forward, but finding it, you know?
That's fantastic. So you said that you got into CrossFit because of the military. Which branch did you serve in?
The Air Force.
Oh, well, thank you for your service.
I appreciate it, man.
For sure. That's something more than I could ever do. I could never commit to something for that many years and be like, do this, do that, and if not, you're dishonestly discharged.
Man. Oh, man. When I was young, I was 19, and I was just like, whatever, let's do it. And I just kind of like signed, not really understanding the depths that it takes and like the commitment level that you really have to serve for the 4 to 6 years that you're going to be in the military. But I'm lucky enough to have I found like people and units and strong faith and fitness and moral value people that really cultivated this person that I am today, that like has a foundation of like Jesus first, having CrossFit and fitness being like a foundation and a rock for me to go to, and a community that has within it that are very strong and like-minded individuals. And it just developed this pattern of behavior. And now I'm able to take that and spread it to other people as a coach. And it's just been a very exciting journey.
So let's actually just take a segment right there. And you're talking about community. And what would you say the most important part about the community within CrossFit is to you?
The most important part about the community in CrossFit is truly the individuals and the camaraderie that comes with it. So that's where the difference in between most gyms or fitness programs really like vary is this community aspect, that whenever you're going out and you're suffering beside somebody, and that is the real definition of CrossFit, is like shared suffering.
Hence why I don't like it.
It's really shared suffering. And it's this like, hey, I'm beside you in the trenches. And that equates to life so well and our like daily life. And you are fighting for the next rep. You're suffering and like, you don't know how you're going to do it some days. And you have to go pick it up. Mm-hmm. Like, how many times in life have you not been able to do it? And you still have to go pick it up. And there's a guy beside you saying, hey, man, I'm doing it with you. Let's go.
Well, that's the same thing as Christianity as well, because in Christianity we are called the body of Christ, and we are supposed to be working together, because Hebrews 10:24 through 25 says we are called to encourage and support one another, and that's what's happening within the CrossFit community.
Absolutely. And it's this way that unknowingly the community of CrossFit is like paralleling the Christian community as well. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of found my niche in this space, in that little middle ground, and trying to grow a community of faith-based people who are so on fire for God and also so passionate about being fit and maintaining a good level of like both and being able to do it beside each other. It's this really life-changing perspective of the CrossFit cult and being a follower of Jesus.
Yeah.
And so the more that I've been able to deep dive into this community of fitness and faith, the more that I'm finding the likeness of Jesus in it through shared sufferings, through his suffering, because I mean, it's terrible. It's not fun. It's not a fun time, but it does take me to this place of like, wow, I'm going through a terrible time in this workout. I'm having to question who I am. How much strength do I have? Like, am I going to even be able to do it? And I can't imagine the things that Jesus was going through, and I can equate it just a small bit through this workout. And I can compare it to other men who have suffered for his name.
Yeah.
And it's just that like little bit that I can deep into, like just a little dip into it.
Yeah. Yeah, because, in CrossFit, individuals work together for that common goal, like you were saying, and whether that's competing a workout, getting a personal record, whatever it may be. And as Christians, we're called to work together towards the common goal of living, of spreading the message of salvation. And so, like, I can see the parallels that you're bringing into things, and that's the whole thing with Y2 Fitness for me is I saw parallels in fitness and Christianity. It's almost like they're hand in hand, but it's almost like, why wouldn't they be hand in hand? God is the ultimate healer, the great physician. He's the author of our bodies. He's the author of life, and he gives us our purpose. And the reason why I work out is to be ready and capable for anything God, the devil, or life throws my way. And I assume that for you, CrossFit is the way to fulfill that as well.
Very much on the same track of like, yeah, absolutely. You're fighting mental battles, you're fighting physical battles, and you're fighting spiritual battles. And it's this way of bringing it out. And it happens in such a short time frame of you're bringing your heart rate to the max that you can do. You're pushing your muscles to this place that it's uncomfortable and like you're breaking down. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you're relying on something more than yourself to get you through it. Mm-hmm. And that's that ethos.
Yeah. Yeah. So in Christianity, we're called to have a clear purpose and aim in life in accordance with God's will, because that's what Philippians 3:12 through 14 says. And that's what I like about CrossFit. Would you say that parallels? Because in CrossFit, what I like about it so much is that you have a clear goal. Here is the workout. Here is what we're doing. We're doing it for time. We're doing it for reps. We're doing it for this. And there isn't any confusion, unlike in bodybuilding, unlike in a lot of other areas. It's almost like if you were to drop them off or even have a personal trainers, it seems like they're making things up as they go. At least in my opinion, why I left personal training and just what I see all around, it's almost like, let's just make things up. But that's what I like about CrossFit, and why I see such an allure to it, is because there is that clear purpose, clear goal. Let's see how fast I can do it. Let's see how much I can do, whatever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. There's all like workouts are layered in AMRAPs, as many rounds as possible. Then you have chippers, which is a laundry list, just going down the list of events. And then you also have triplets and couplets. A triplet being 3 movements, a couplet being 2.
Okay.
All right. So you can go for time or AMRAP. That's kind of based how it's done. And then you can do EMOM, which is every minute on the minute, or on the minutes, OTMs. So those are kind of the 3 to 4 foundations of each workout. So you're going to have that like overarching, and then the movements are pretty standard. So it's functional, varied movements across broad time domains. And that's at a high intensity. That's the definition of CrossFit. So we are taking those functional movements, if it's burpees, pull-ups, and squats, and you're doing this workout, you can do that in such a various like ways that it's going to be challenging to you no matter what. And the dangers do lie in the coaching. That's transferable across CrossFit, bodybuilding, whatever form of fitness you're doing. Coaching is going to be inconsistent. It's a lot of dangers.
Yep.
But that target goal, and if you have it within yourself and you have good coaching and good direction, you're going to be successful in it. And that pushing yourself pace and that like mindset of like, hey, I'm reaching a little deeper, I'm going to gain another second or another rep is there as well. But there are dangers and fallbacks that you have to be watching out for. There are a lot of things that like injury prone things that could happen for the fitness. And like your overall story can get cut off pretty short in CrossFit without like proper technique and coaching. And that's kind of where a lot of the, Yeah,
well, let's dive into that. You said proper coaching. I haven't been around much CrossFit. Mm-hmm. You obviously have. What would you say that the majority of CrossFit coaches, or the overwhelming majority, aren't great coaches? Or if you had to guess? What have you seen? What has been your experience?
I would say that it's not that there's overwhelming bad coaches. Mm-hmm. There's underwhelming amount of education.
Okay.
If that makes sense, right? Yeah. The education and the like self-research that has to go into, like you spend hours and hours looking up technique, right? Like there's so much technique in Olympic lifting alone.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of thousands of hours that have to go into it to be a professional coach at Olympic lifting. All right, well, you're taking a guy that has several hundred hours and putting him in charge of adults that have never done it before. Mm-hmm. All right, you're a niche part of it, and you don't even you're dipping a toe into that water and expecting to be an expert at it for somebody else that's never touched it. So that's the danger. Mm-hmm. That's really where the danger lies, is you are not knowledgeable enough in that specific realm to be effective.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, and that goes across the board with all fitness. Let's be real, because I always say doctors are still practicing.
Yes.
We go to a doctor's practice. They're practicing. Absolutely. They have malpractice. That's why insurance costs them through the roof. So if doctors are still practicing, what are personal trainers and fitness coaches doing?
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of that, like, whenever you go in, you want to be self-educated enough to see, hey, they're not doing it right too. Or like, hey, I know how I'm supposed to do it, like the movement well enough. Mm-hmm. And there's tons of stories of Olympic athletes that have gone to CrossFit gyms and they were like corrected and they're like, hey man, I have like a 400-pound clean and jerk. Like, I know what I'm doing. And it's like, this dude that's the coach barely gets up 200. And it's like, why are you correcting me, man? You can't, you don't know what you're talking about. And it's like this underwhelming amount of education that's gone into the coaching. I mean, when you dive into the courses for CrossFit, they're very good. Those guys, they're professional. They have professionals on board their teams and they're coaching from a professional level. But the individual coaching at most gyms is underdeveloped.
Yeah.
And there's no incentive for them to go and chase more development. Because once they get their certification, then they're like, oh, I'm a coach. I can just...
Then it more becomes about sales than it is about effectiveness.
Exactly.
Because
so you stop the product.
Within that big chunk, because after that big chunk, to get to that elite, you not only have to be good at sales, there also everything just has to fall in place. And then you have to get a couple athletes under yourself or be the athlete of yourself in the CrossFit games in order to get to that top level. So there really isn't that much incentive to keep getting better.
Yeah. And money and time, right?
Yeah.
Like two biggest ones. And like that is a danger. So whenever we get new athletes, especially when I have new athletes in, right, we will stop everything. We'll like break down their form. We'll like, hey, we had an athlete come in the other day, for example, and we were doing high hang snatches. One of the most precise and technical movements there is in all of fitness. The snatch. Crazy technical movement. I like compare it to a driver on the narrowest fairway, and if you are not hitting it perfectly straight, you're out of bounds.
Yeah.
And so like while a power clean is like kind of like a cannonball into a swimming pool, like you can just you can muscle it, it's going to happen. Like you might get it and you're not putting yourself in so much risk. But a snatch is such a long, precise movement. If you are not perfect, it is out of bounds and you have risk of injury.
Yeah.
And you see this ego that comes into a gym, and all of a sudden they're throwing on weights that they can't hold and they can't handle, and they're trying to get it overhead. And it's like the margin for error every pound you go up narrows. And so there's this stop, hold on. You just don't know where you're headed. And I feel like that sense of danger is such a like real and present thing in our lives. And so it should be taken with the same seriousness as in fitness.
Well, and that actually just reminded me, I've actually never thought of this before, is within the Christian walk, that when you first become a Christian, you get out there guns a-blazing. You are in the darkness. You now see. You are like, wow, I have this freedom. Yet you probably never read the whole Bible before, if any of it.
Yeah.
You don't have any spiritual discipline of praying. Your community around you is probably not that large. So it's almost like you're a prime target, and that's one of the parables of the seed that Jesus was talking about. That you got it on the streets, that the devil instantly plucks it up, but then it goes into the shallow soil and it fails to take root. And then also gets the third seed that gets amongst the vines and it gets choked out. And I feel like so many Christians out there go out there guns a-blazing. I feel great, but then they meet this resistance. And then all of a sudden they go, oh, well, that was fake. Whatever I just felt wasn't real. And it's almost like now they're turned off, and yet now they turned off other people because they tried to recruit their mom. They tried to recruit their dad, their friends. I found this new freedom. And then the next thing you know it, they're back in addiction, they're back in depression, they're back in anxiety because it wore off, because they never got the spiritual training. They didn't put themselves around the right community. They didn't get rooted into the Bible and into the prayer. That's why, at least here in the West, I kind of have a bone to pick a little bit with the churches, because we're so antsy to be like, oh, let's accept Christ as your Savior, when a lot of people don't even know what that means. Like, what does it really mean to be a disciple of Christ? What does it really mean to make God the Lord of all areas of your life? Because we know Matthew 7:31 says, there's going to be many saying, Lord, Lord, I did this. And he's going to say, only those that really follow my commands are going to make it in heaven. But Lord, I did all this. Depart from me, I never knew you. One of the scariest Bible verses there are.
Absolutely.
And I just hear this CrossFit going on, that there's such an enthusiasm to get in, and then you got a coach that's just more, I'm sure, a coach that just wants to get another sale, that wants another body in the gym. So they go out with guns a-blazing, and they're like, hey, let's just have fun. But it's almost like they're setting themselves up for disaster, especially when you're doing these jerks overhead. Yeah,
absolutely. And I would say that most of these coaches are actually more on fire about the actual CrossFit methodology. Okay. So they're so excited about like what they're doing, because it's very fun. It's very involved. You're very on fire for it. And they're so pumped about you being there and a part of it that they don't stop themselves from saying, hey, could I be walking them down the wrong road? Right? Like, and who are they following? Like, it's that question. It's like they're so excited about the methodology and the training themselves. Most coaches are like trying to compete. So they're trying to be athletes in this like space of fitness, because where CrossFit differs from every other, like most other fitness things, it's a sport at the end of the day. All right. Like golf, you can go play 18 today.
Yeah.
All right. You can't go compete at the CrossFit Games today, but you can do the Golf Open. You can do the World Golf Open. Yeah. You can do the CrossFit Open, Worldwide Open. It's the same thing. There's levels to it, and you can go higher up the levels. In golf, you can go higher up the levels if you're just good enough. But everybody can play at the same time. And so these coaches, and I have the tendency to get excited about myself because that's what I want to do. I want to compete. I want to play. So we have this tendency of like, oh, you want to play? Come on, let's compete. It's game time. And so we'll get people in, and then we'll get excited about, hey, this is the fun. This is where the magic happens right here. And then all of a sudden, they were not ready for that. That was not the space for it, and it was too early and premature. Mm-hmm. And that, I feel like that's the exact same thing in most people's Christian lives, of like them being like, oh, I'm so ready for it. And they jump in so fast to the water, they would never realize, hey, this might be cold, and it's going to be a shock to your system. And all of a sudden, they're reeling right back out of the water, and you're like, jumped in too fast, man. You didn't wade in.
Or they're spreading false things, which is plethora in the church and all that
Absolutely.
Stuff. No, for sure. But well, let's just take a step back. And you said with these beginners, or not even that, you said it's a sport at the end of the day. Because that's one of the things when, me and my bodybuilder guys are poking fun at the CrossFit guys, but at the end of the day, I always equate it to like, hey, the CrossFit Games determine who the most fit person in the world is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that is what the CrossFit Games do. I will be the one to attest that is true. They are able to do heavyweight for a long time, endurance for a long time, speed, absolutely everything. At agile, they're doing handstand push-ups, they're doing pistol squats. They're the most capable, crazy people they are.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'll admit that, but that's why I then say to the when you see the overweight, undernourished, dehydrated mother of 3, father of 2, go, I'm doing CrossFit and I've lost 14 pounds in the past month. It's like, well, first off, it's probably water weight in the beginning, but I just listened to that and I'm like, ooh, that sounds so dangerous. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And we make fun of it, and that's why we call it almost cult-like. Mm-hmm. And I equate it to like, hey, if you wanted to lose weight, would you go play tackle football?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's what I say. Like, anyone with a head on their shoulders is not going to be like, hey, I want to lose weight. And their first guess is tackle football, because they're going to, the injury and the risk to reward ratio is prevalent there. But in the CrossFit, in the very beginning, our bodies are made awesome. We got God's breath in us. We're made in His image. We're capable to get done what's put in front of us in the short run, but no one really knows the long run effect. So my question to you is, what would your advice be to beginners in CrossFit? Because that's where usually us bodybuilders kind of make fun of it, or personal trainers, or anyone outside of CrossFit for that matter, group fitness, whatever it may be, when they're making fun of it, it's like we're looking at it that those types of people, beginners, shouldn't be doing these crazy things. But clearly everyone has to start somewhere. So my question would be for the listeners is, as a beginner getting into CrossFit, what advice would you give them?
Absolutely. That's a fantastic question. And it really does come up a lot. And they teach it, and it kind of gets left behind. And it's this lack of education. I keep coming back to it. One of those things that I always bring up first in like initial conversations with people is, hey, like, let's talk about your diet. That's one of the first things we talk about, because that's the base of everything that you're going to do in fitness is, what are you eating? What are you doing outside of here? Because I can take care of you all day long, but I don't know what you're eating. I don't know what you're drinking. I don't know what you're doing at home.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a look at the things that you're doing outside of the gym, because we wanted to give you this access to like a really fun community, a really challenging workout, and you're going to get a lot of new things happening to your body. What are you doing to sustain it, fill it, and come back for more
and excel in it?
Yeah. And so you'll see people that are like doing no changes to diets and expecting results in the gym, and that happens in bodybuilding as well. I'm sure you see,
that happens across the board.
Yeah, I'm sure you see that everywhere, and it is a real prevalent problem. But if you have a good coach and somebody that's like, hey, I want to be attentive to my the athletes that I'm taking care of and the people in my gym, then you won't see that problem. You can go to great gyms and they are addressing like, hey, let's take care of your diet. And once they do buy into the, hey, we're going to change the home life, all of a sudden the transformation to very fit and very accomplished athletes happens very quickly because the methodology does work.
Oh, yeah.
So like you said, they're the fittest. Like people that win the games are the fittest on earth.
Mm-hmm.
No doubt. These dudes are carrying loads that like people 500-pound back squats in a sub 5-minute mile.
Yeah.
Like that's the ultimate goal.
Back to back
in the same day within like a couple hours.
Yeah.
All right. That was unheard of. Like in 2000, 2020, that is held by hundreds of people.
Yeah.
So CrossFit is breaking down this concept of like, hey, you can't be super powerful and super agile. You can't be like a long distance. I know guys that are doing ultra marathons, like 50 and 100 mile races, and also squatting 400.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, if you can accomplish that and do the other, wow, maybe there's something to it.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah. No, and that's kind of like where that, hey, what are you doing outside of here that matters the most? What recovery efforts are you making? What nutrition diet plans are you following? And how are you taking on that role at home?
Yeah, well, in Y2 Fitness, we have the 3 laws of fitness.
Mm.
You are what you eat.
Mm.
You're efficient at what you do, and you become what you think.
That's good.
Right there is you are what you eat. And that everything you eat becomes the cells that are in your body. Every cell in your body turns over at least every 7 years.
Absolutely.
Other than the ones in your cerebral cortex, because if those turned over, you'd have a different personality every 7 years. But every cell turns over at least every 7 years. Skin turns over, every 14 days, whatever it is. Stomach lining every about 3 days. Mm. And the list goes on. But what are those cells being comprised of is the foods that you are eating.
Absolutely.
And that is why you become literally what you eat. And that is the difference within bodybuilding, within now you're saying CrossFit, within everywhere in life is what you're putting in your body is going to dictate what you are. Mm. And yes, you can be efficient at what you do, but if you're undernourished, under-rested, and pushing yourself to the limits, you're going to be efficient at pushing yourself at the limits with less nutrition, with being undernourished. Mm. But what does that look like? Well, that's going to be, let's just label it what it is, stress. Yep. Stressful. And that's where the plethora of diseases come. That's where you'll see these 40, 35-year-old women and men that look like they're fit, but they are pre-diabetic.
Yeah.
Because they are going to be so undernourished and just pushing and pushing. This is where cancers come from. This is where all the list of diseases really come from, because no one really can measure how much stress can each body take, and you can't just sit there and point, well, it was this, it was the meat, it was the GMOs, it was the whatever. The list goes on, because that's just people blaming so they can not take responsibility that they aren't doing what needed to be done. And what needs to be done looks different for everyone, because someone that doesn't have quite as good as diet but has amazing rest may be doing better than someone that has less rest but has an amazing diet.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, there isn't any true proven formula, but that is why in the Bible it says run your own race and not be comparing yourself with others, but also it's a sin to know what you ought to do and not do it. So as you start moving through the process and you start putting yourself around a community, especially in CrossFit, you start taking it in. If you realize your protein's low, you now are faced with a choice. Do I increase it or I just say poo-poo? If you realize you're getting 4 hours of sleep, we already know you are not going to be performing. So that goes across the board, which is the diet. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. But what other than the diet? So let's just say someone gets the diet, they're on point, or at least they're trying, they listen to you. What other advice would you give to a beginner, like in the physical realm?
Mobility.
Mobility
is the biggest limiter of people's success in fitness. Hands down, because you can just change your diet. Like we can feed you different foods. We can just give you a list of, hey, this is what you're going to eat. We can change that. We can give you the stimulus for a workout. But if you cannot get access to range of motion in joints and muscles, we can't help you. So like half of my day is spent giving people mobility drills. Half of my day in classes is stopping people, saying, hey, let's work on your in range of motion in your like shoulders, hips, ankles. Like, that's the biggest 3 problems for most people.
So a lot of people, when they think of mobility, they instantly think of stretching, and that's about the only thing that's coming to their mind. So explain to the listeners another thing other than just, okay, let's see if I can touch my toes. Let's see how high my hands can go up above my head. What are some mobility things or techniques or drills or exercises that you're referring to that also play into it?
No, man, just open up a whole can of worms, man. There's hundreds and
for sure, but just for example, so you can point them in the right direction of Google, like when they're going and Googling.
So one of the biggest things for people squatting, right? Like you have high bar and low bar back squat, right? High bar being more quad dominant, more upright chest. And this translates over to Olympic lifting in the front rack position, holding that barbell across your shoulders, right? Yep. So this is going to ultimately lead to a heavier clean. So we do high bar back squat with an emphasis on our quads. One of those limiters is ankle mobility. If you cannot keep the barbell within that midline of your body coming up from the midfoot all the way up to shoulders, and you start leaning forward or back, you're out of that alignment. So that barbell being in the front rack and creating that power away from the floor is useless.
So what would be something that you'd be increasing that ankle mobility?
So one of those things that I give a lot of people is like the weighted squat holds. Being in the bottom of a squat for any duration of time, over like a second, I will have people do 10-second holds. I'll have people do 30-second holds to a minute. And I'll have them do 3 to 5 sets. Yeah. Because mobility is load in position. Yep. That's all mobility is giving them a load and saying, hey, you're going to hold this uncomfortable position for however long. So one of those things, I did it today, is I take a weight, and I'll hold it out in front of me, and I'll get into the bottom of my squat, and I'll actively push my knees out with my mind, and I'm forcing that hip mobility, forcing that ankle mobility, and I'll shift my weight from foot to foot, getting my knee over my toe as far as I can without my heel coming off the ground. Yeah. And what this is doing is it's unlocking that ankle and those hips so that I can get into a better in-range of motion for my squat. And I can get deeper depth and more comfortable with that thoracic spine, with those hip girdles, and that ankle. And it's going to keep those knees tracking over that toe and really, really good, solid, upright form so you're not collapsing down on your chest when you're doing your front squats. That is one of the best drills. Oh, yeah. And people don't ever do it because they just, I'm just going to do air squats. Well, if you sit back like you're sitting down on the toilet, you're collapsing your chest towards the ground like a low bar back squat, trying to emphasize the power of your hamstrings to push the floor away. Well, you're underutilizing your quad, and you're not going to actually get the emphasis and the effect that we were looking for in the first place. Mm-hmm. And that's the education side. And I will, if I'm giving an athlete this, I'll be like, hey, I know this sounds dumb, but I'm going to tell you all about this right now so you understand why we're doing these drills.
Yeah, so many athletes will hear you, and they'll go in one ear and out the other. It's so many times because the funny thing is well, not so funny. You know, I've tried so many times to help people, tell people. I will literally show somebody how to do it, and they'll be like, "Whoa, I feel it that much more." I turn around, I walk around, they do the next set, and it's right back to what they were just doing.
Yep.
It drives me nuts. It
Absolutely.
drives me nuts. But
every day.
Oh,
the same group of people every day that show up at the gym.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But just talking about that squat, I do that as a warm up. I usually have a kettlebell. I'll be going back and forth, opening up my hips, working on that ankle mobility. I usually then finish my workouts a little bit like that. Today I just grabbed a 50-pound weight, did a nice wide sumo deadlift, and I just sat as erect as I possibly could and just worried about my hips going forward and back, not up and down.
Yeah.
And my glutes were just on fire. Because a lot of people, when they're doing their squats, they don't even feel their glutes while they're doing it, because you can do a squat and not have your glutes be firing.
Absolutely.
And that's that, and you can start pushing weight, all that type of stuff, but then you're going to get to a level, because at the beginning level, at the light weights that you originally can do, yes, it's not going to cause much damage, but the moment you've been going for 2 weeks, your body's saying, I'm lifting heavy, I need to be doing something, and instantly you will become stronger. This is that newbie gains. This is that beginning where everyone's praising CrossFit's the best, personal training's the best, this method, that method. Anything that's brand new is going to be good within that very first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because your body's just trying to be efficient at it. But if your glutes aren't firing, all of a sudden you start pushing up that weight. Now all of a sudden your hips may be overtaking too much brunt end, your lower back, whatever it may be, and that's where the injury starts coming into play.
And that's where the, again, under-education of our coaches. That is a huge thing that I talk to PTs, I talk to chiropractors, I've had the opportunity to work with them and had great experience with all of them, and they've worked within the CrossFit space. And they were CrossFitters as well. And they're like, hey, whenever you talk to somebody, emphasize that this is lacking. One of those things that I do on a daily is I work with athletes on breaking down scar tissuing of lactic acid buildup and just pushing out all that toxic stuff that builds up in your muscles and clearing it out so that they can actually get the in range of motion. For overhead mobility, right? If you're doing a strict press, and I was working with an athlete for 30 minutes for them to be able to actually get their hand over their head and it not be forward and out, right? To get their biceps, go to their ears, and back. Their lats were so tight that they couldn't even raise their arms up without them being stuck. And so we're sitting there for 30 minutes rolling out their lats.
Yeah.
And within 30 minutes, all of a sudden they're holding barbells with weight, strict press overhead, and it looks amazing. And it's like, hey, you don't have to be injured. Your shoulder hurts because your back is so tight that you can't actually extend your arms, and you've been trying to force weight on it that was never supposed to be put on there. And so part of our job as a coach and the responsibility is recognizing, hey, this person's in range of motion is so locked up that we have to back them up, reset them, clear out the problems, and then put them back into position.
Yeah, and in the Bible, it strictly says, Paul says, boast about your weakness because God's power is made perfect in our weakness. And that's one of the best pieces of advice that I would give any personal trainer, any type of coach, any type of athlete, anyone trying to achieve anything in the health space is boast about your weakness. Because too often people look at their strong suits. They walk in with the ego. See all that I can do is what they're almost, how can I perform? But I always tell them hey, you do understand you are training. You're not performing.
You're training.
When you are in the games, that's when you can kind of break that little bit of technique because you're performing at that moment. But when you are training, always remember you're training. And when you're training, you're looking for weak spots, because they always say the chain is only as strong as the weakest link.
Absolutely.
So in the Christian faith, we boast about our weakness, because then when we boast about it, our community can come around it. We bring it out to the surface. So then if we do keep doing it, we even feel worse about it. And that's the best type of advice I'd give anyone is, hey, stop looking at how you can do more and get what you're already good at being better, but instead, what am I bad at?
Yeah.
What is my weakness?
Well, that's where CrossFit, I think, edges out a lot of other styles of fitness, man. There is no hiding. You can't hide in the middle of a 20-minute workout where you're doing 3 of your worst movements, and it's like, this is just going bad. Like, I'm having a terrible time. Like,
I can imagine.
I'm a tall dude, right? So like me doing.
Well, how tall are you? Just to share.
I'm 6'6".
Okay,
yeah.
there you go.
I'm a tall dude. So CrossFit is like a short man's paradise, right? I'm 6'6". Me doing strict handstand push-ups is a nightmare. Like, I weigh 240. I'm 6'6". I have long arms. It's a range of motion problem that like a lot of people don't have, and all those tall dudes out there, they know what's up. All right.
Shout out to the tall dudes.
Yeah, shout out to the tall guys. All right, so like doing a strict handstand push-up, you're coming all the way down to your head and extending back up. All right, I'm moving 240 pounds, while some dude that weighs 175 and is 5'5",
well,
banging in
and
all day.
Not only that, you're moving 14 inches up and down.
And he's
they're moving 9 inches.
Yeah. And it's like, oh man, this is terrible. But so you cannot hide that glaring weakness because you have to get all the reps done before you can move on. Like in a lot of other aspects, you can just be like, all right, like I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to train it in a different way and I'm going to move around it, and I can kind of fake the end result. You cannot fake end results here. Either you do the rep or you don't. Like, either you do all of the reps and all the strict handstand push-ups that I don't want to do, or I don't. And there's no hiding. Like, you are stuck there until you get through it. And that is where, like, okay, especially as a competitor, it matters. As an athlete that's in the gym training, perfect. Let's find that place, and we're going to break it down to, it's called scaling, right? And you guys have scaling as well. Even better term is tailoring. Right, if you're a sales guy, tailoring sounds better than scaling.
Yeah.
So you tailor it down to where you're at. So if it's like, hey, for me, strict handstand push-ups are tailorable, pike push-ups. All right, elevated feet pike push-ups. All right, kipping handstand push-ups, strict handstand push-ups. So you go down the levels to a point where you can be successful, and that is what we do with our athletes all day long. Mm-hmm. So I'm not expecting the new guy in the gym to be able to do strict handstand push-ups. That is not at all what we're looking for. If you can, power to you, man. That's awesome. Glad you're doing it. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is get you the same stimulus at a different progression level, and you still be able to accomplish the rep scheme and the work. And it's going to be the same intensity. Yeah. So your grandma and you can do the same workout. She's going to do different movements. She's going to have a different movement pattern. She's going to have the same reps. But the results of the muscle groups, the results of the stimulus are going to be the same.
And I do like that, the way that you're putting that about CrossFit, because in just typical fitness, personal training, whatever, bodybuilding, just the typical personal trainer, you go to the gym, you get a personal trainer, whatever it is, it's so easy to hide. You know, you'll see the person rowing and their shoulders are so forward, but they're still getting the row done, but they're never engaging those lats with the shoulders back. Yeah. You'll have the bad coaches that don't even care, and they're more cared about when's lunch. You know, that's a dime a dozen, but you can hide so easily within the gym, and that's why you'll see guys that have these huge backs and these tiny chests with their shoulders rolled in, and they're just walking around like they're these beasts. And it's like you do look like a gorilla. You understand that, like a big old turtle shell back. Like you don't have this open chest. And what are they complaining about? Oh, my front shoulders are so tight. You know, because they're not sitting there having to perform, get better. It's
doing
more of
range of motion
ego, and it's more about just looking good and feeling good, not so much about performance.
And that's that flip that CrossFit has had on the script of like, hey, what is fitness? It's taken away that the look of it, because if you look at somebody like Matt Frazier, right, like the 5-time fittest man on earth.
Yep.
Undeniably, he's at a level that nobody else could touch. So fit, so strong, so athletic. But he doesn't look like the 5-time fittest man on earth. There's like Justin Medeiros, the other 2-time fittest man on earth recently. He doesn't look like the 2-time fittest man on earth, but he is smashing people left and right. He looks very fit. But if you pass him in the airport, he's like, oh, that dude works out. You pass by Matt Frazier, you're like, oh, that dude looks like he works out a lot. But you're not like looking at him like, oh, that's C-bum. Like, oh my gosh, that's C-bum right there.
Of course. Well, even just you and me, obviously our listeners can't see us, but if you go on the YouTube channel, I have a bigger back than you. I have bigger arms than you. I have a little bit, I have shape to me. I'm a bodybuilder. I'm an ex-IFBB pro. Yet you squat more than me. You run way faster than me. Yeah. We haven't even done a CrossFit workout together, so I already know you're going to just do laps around me. Granted, I'll hold my own. Yeah, absolutely. I hold my own because I incorporate everything.
There's workouts that you'd beat me in. They're 100%.
Oh, I'm sure. There's certain ones. I 100% believe it, But, like, in total, I would say you are a lot more fit in that realm than I am.
Absolutely.
And I know this, but that just goes to show you can't judge by a cover. You can't sit there and just look at it, and that's where CrossFit is skewing those lines. But like we even said all the way back in the beginning, doctors are practicing. What are we doing? Guessing? Because working out, training really didn't really get popular until the 70s with Arnold and all them. Yeah. And they were thinking one way, and now there's a brand new way, and there's a brand new way. And CrossFit's how old, do you know?
18 years old now.
Around 18 years, so post 2000s. Yeah. So it's still in almost its infancy. If you really look at really bodybuilding, working out, fitness is really still in its infancy. We're at 50 years or so, if you really look at it, there is no best way. That's why there is so much ways for abuse. There is so many ways to have these crappy trainers, these crappy coaches being able to come in and weasel in. But I would say that's the same thing with Christianity, is we do have freedom. We do say, hey, it's not about the law, it's about relationship, which then you get so many false teachers, you get so many group leaders, you get so many Christian friends that are like, well, it's okay to have sex before marriage. Oh, well, it's okay to smoke cigarettes. Yeah. It's okay because that's their current struggle, which it's like, wait a minute, no, it's not. I'm not saying that it will bar you from heaven, but it doesn't mean it's beneficial. No, and that's why I love about fitness is like for me it's the best way to showcase in a worldly way, because Jesus talked in parables, and it's the best way for me to spread the gospel and the best way to talk about Christianity, because I can just be like, well, here's your body, here's this workout. Oh, you want to get better? Well, there's this many ways. It's the same thing with Christianity.
Absolutely.
And which leads me to a point. You mentioned that you're part of a non-profit within your CrossFit community. Can you expand on that?
Absolutely. So 11th Element is created by a guy from Boynton Beach. His name is Logan Poirier. Super great dude. He trains over at CrossFit Boynton Beach. He kind of like as a youth pastor and like kind of growing up in the space of being like in the church, and he fell in love with doing fitness and CrossFit, and he was like, I'm looking for a way to bridge the gap and bring this community together of Christians and make a gym a church, a home for people to come to where they can feel like, hey, we can have like a men's group. We can have just people come together. We can have little like just after workout sermons and just be a community within the community of fitness. And this is not just happening at CrossFit gyms. This is happening at, I know of 7 other gyms that we have people working at that are just being the pastor of their community, right? Quote unquote pastor. And just leading within their gym. And so our mission is to, hey, like, we give the opportunity and space for people to come to and just evangelize, fellowship, and be a community within the community at large. And it gives us a space to reach out further and just kind of be Jesus to people that need it. There's tons of stories that have come out of these communities of people like going through life struggles and being able to tie it back to their fitness journeys and being able to relate to people that have been struggling and with them through these journeys. And that's why it's so important to be there in that type of community of like, hey, shared struggle. All right, I might not be going through what you're going through, but I've been in the trenches with you for the last 6 months in the gym every day. okay, like, you know that I'm going to pick up the weight beside you. You know I'm going to pick up you because you're struggling. I'm going to pick up your weight too. And I can be there to support you, and you can be there to support me. And that's kind of the overall mission of this.
What's your role in it? Like, what do you do?
So my job is to pretty much create this community at CrossFit West Boca. That's ultimately the end result of what my job is to be the leader of the community there.
And so what would that look like to be the leader? Are you going to have like small groups? Are you going to have prayer time, Bible time? Like what would that look like?
So it's kind of at the end of like our week, we have like the class, we have our normal fitness class. And then at the end of it, we'll just say, hey, we got 10 minutes. If you guys want to, we're going to be having a prayer time, a little reading scripture, a little devotional, and that'll be it. And just like time for people to share what's going on in life, whatever like the Spirit hit them with. And so I'll kind of just, whatever word I have, like whatever I feel like, hey, throughout the week, month, year, that God's been kind of putting on me, or whatever somebody else will bring forward and be like, hey, this is kind of just what I need to talk about. Is it okay if I just take up the 10 minutes? And it's like, awesome. Yeah, absolutely, man. Come on with it. And so I opened up with the first one being cows and buffalo. Have you ever heard that story? Awesome story.
Nope.
So cows and buffaloes. So whenever a storm comes in life, cows will run away from the storm. Right? They will turn tail and run from storms, while buffalo will turn and run towards them. They will run straight into whatever winter storm's coming. They will face it down and go through it, and they were on the other side where the grass is greener because of all the rain that was provided. While the cows will run as fast as they can from it. The storm will chase them, and they will end up farther away from the things that we were supposed to have in the first place. And they will eventually get caught. The storm will wreck them, run them over, and they have to trek all the way back to where that fresh grass is because the storm has ruined the land before it. And that is such an analogy of our lives and the way that we will run away from our callings, from what God has for us. And all of a sudden, we get wrecked by the storm, and we have to trek our way back to where God had us placed in the first place. And if we would have started out, saw the storm that was coming and trusted in God and just went right into it, on the other side, there would have been this fresh green grass. So that's the first opening story.
I like that because, it says it right there, rejoice in your trials.
Yeah.
For they produce endurance. Endurance produces character, and character produces the hope in Jesus Christ that we have.
Yeah.
So that right there is an excellent way to say that. And that's what I love about fitness as well, is there you go again, just proving our point that we're trying to drive home, that fitness has so many parallels with Christianity.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And that's ultimately that, like, hey, the storms of life are so equal to the storms of fitness, right? Like, you're going to have a bad season in the gym. It's going to come. Even if this is your first time going to the gym, you're going to have so many wins, and then it's going to stop. And you're going to be like, what happened? And then, like, you're going to have a season where you're either injured, you're going to have a season where you can't be there. And all of a sudden, you're having to reattack and reattach yourself back into this, like, this fitness community or back into the gym on a regular basis. And it's going to be like, why was this so much harder? Mm-hmm. And that's the same thing in life. It's like, okay, like, you're going to fall off the wagon sometime. It happens. Okay, that doesn't mean you're out of the game. Mm-hmm. You're going through a setback. You're going through a storm. But what if God put that there just for you to get through it? What if God puts that injury on you just so that you have to go back and retrain the things that you were weak at and you avoided and were scared of?
Yeah.
Right? Like, that happened all the time. You see injuries, especially in CrossFit, because there are injuries, but there's injuries in bodybuilding, there's injuries in every sport. Mm-hmm. People that get injured in CrossFit will be like, man, honestly, I did not want to do the things that I needed to do to not be injured. And it's like, well, if I'd have just done them in the first place. And I feel like that's such a thing in our Christian walk of like, man, if I'd have just done this in the first place, I would never ended up where I was. And I would not have to be going through what I did.
Yep. But going through that is actually God's way of even though we don't appreciate it at the point, but it's his way of saying, hey, cool, you did it by yourself. You now realized you can't do it. Stop. And yes, it may be through injury, but then we can learn so much from that. And that just makes it so important to make sure that the result isn't the goal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's one thing that the fitness in general, and even CrossFit, even on top of it, is they're always so focused on the results. But we know that the results are up to God. But the effort is up to us. And through that, we will be able to learn from our downfalls. And even when, and the quicker we can get off of our high horse, that we can accept what happened. The injury happened, the disease happened, whatever it is. Okay, it happened. What am I going to learn from it? How can I get better from it? Is the way you're going to quickly get back on track. And that's one thing I've learned is in our faith is we're all going to fall. The Bible says the righteous man falls down 7 times, but he gets back up again. We all are going to fail. But the closer you are to the source, the closer you are to God, the more further you are on the walk, it's then going to determine how quickly you get back up. Yep. How quickly you get back up is determined by how close you were to God. What do you learn about God? What about your community? What's your prayer life look like? Is how quickly you get back up. Because what used to destroy me so quickly, and a little bit of a back injury, it's like when that back there just swells up, you're like, ow. At first you're just like, okay, I'm going to take a week off. Well, those types of injuries, you don't take weeks off.
No.
Because then you're just going to go back to it and you're going to be feeling worse.
Yeah,
you learn that. But the moment you're, okay, that happened, what do I do? Oh, well, I should probably work on mobility. Let's work on stretching. Oh, this is my opportunity to focus on cardio a little bit more. Because you always just want to pivot. In fitness is what I've learned is how can I pivot? How can I learn from this and now get stronger in an area that I wasn't just doing?
Yeah. One of those things and one of the beauties of training the way that we do in CrossFit is that you can kind of go on a cycle, especially if you can get your gym into it. And like you, as the leader of a gym, you can say, hey, you know what? We're going to do a strength cycle. We're going to do a powerlifting cycle for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
All right. After that, we're going to do 8 weeks of gymnastics. Yeah. So, we're going to work on our pull-ups. We're going to do, the goofy butterfly pull-ups. I know you guys love those. Bar muscle-ups.
Yeah, bar muscle-ups, all that stuff.
Handstand walks, handstand push-ups. We're going to work on an 8-week progression for that. We're going to work on an 8-week progression of cardio. So, we're going to work on rowing, biking, skiing, running, and we're going to, progress across 8 weeks. We're going to do strongman. We're going to do 8 weeks of strongman. You can just do so many various things, and you can tailor it into your gym's programming that you'll never get kind of caught up in the routine, and you'll always switch, and you're always trying to attack an area that you're weak. Mm-hmm. And then it's never setting you up for this injury prone idealism of hey, we're hitting the bench, back squat, and deadlift for 15 weeks. Yeah. And it's of course you're injured, man.
Yep.
Of course you are. You did that. You've maxed out 4 times in 4 months. Of course you're injured.
Yeah, we're supposed to do that in bodybuilding too. You're supposed to have times when you're all pushing a lot heavier weights, times that you're doing hypertrophy, your 10 to 12s. And then there's also times where it happens a lot more in powerlifting as well. Then you have those rest periods, those off periods. But so many people get an idol of fitness that it's if I don't go to the gym, then I go crazy. Yep. If I don't get this, if I don't keep progressing and bench what I did the other day, the other month, I feel crappy about myself. And I would just challenge all the listeners that are like that is to really look at it and ask yourself, hey, would I be okay if all of this was removed?
Yeah.
If God said, hey, no more, would it be removed? And if you're not okay, chances are you got an idol. Yeah, and that's a false idol. That's what the whole Old Testament is about. You think the Old Testament is all crazy, they saw God, but then they instantly worshiped a golden calf. Well, I'm sorry, one can be an iron calf, and you could be worshiping it. You know, and I see it all the time. They're like, well, I threw it in the fire and out came this. Well, you went into the gym and out came a 45-pound weight. Out came this. Yeah. And you can worship it. How often do you get on your knees with the cable behind your head and start bowing down to the weights? Yet how often do you actually go and pray and get onto your knees to God? Yeah. You know, it really is. I always say it is one of the biggest Trojan horses of our day, that it comes in because the devil comes disguised as an angel of light. Yeah. It's going to come like I'm helping you. It's going to come like it's the best thing forward. It'll be accepted in the Christian realm. It'll be accepted at the church. But it just like that, it can go for, you know, it's right there in that gray area. All of a sudden, you are going to get spit out because you aren't fully focused on Christ. You're not doing it for Christ. And that's what Y2 Fitness is all about, is finding that purpose behind it. And it's not to be better at CrossFit. Yes, that is the mode. Yeah. You know, to be better at bodybuilding, to be stronger, that's the mode. But the ultimate goal should be to bring glory to God. Absolutely. And that's what you're doing. That's why I have you on the podcast. That's what I'm trying to do, is because it's not just about being the best. It's being the best so then I can attract others. Yep. The best I can be, at least, you know, so then I can attract others and point them to Christ. And that's what this podcast is about. That's what you are doing, and that's why I have you on the podcast. And just to wrap up, what would be any advice that you want to give to anyone? Some closing words or motivation, whatever it may be.
Yeah, that was great. I appreciate you having me on, man. It's been a really fun time. This is an amazing podcast. I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
And then for people that are interested in trying different things, it is okay to come in and just be like, hey, I'm new. I'm not sure about this. And I just heard about it and I thought I should give it a shot. Come try. Yeah. Take it with a grain of salt. Come in with an open mind. Leave your ego at the door. That's the biggest one, is you're not going to be the best at it. Don't try to be the best at it on the first day, because who really is ever the best at it? Yeah. You're always going to be humbled. Come in with that type of attitude and you're going to have fun. And then just keep working hard, man. Keep showing up. Keep showing up for God. Keep showing up to the gym, you know?
Excellent. And tell everybody where they can find you. How they can...
Instagram at I am Wilson Bailey. I work here at CrossFit West Boca, and you can find me Pursuit of Break Coffee as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, brother. I appreciate it, man.
Yes, it was a pleasure. And thank you all listeners for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you.